This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey friend, welcome to another episode of the ODAT Chat podcast. My name is Arlena and I'll be your host. This is a podcast where my guests and I talk about how to recover from alcoholism and addiction. We typically spend the first half of the interview on their story and the second half discussing the lessons learned and practices which lead to long-term recovery. You can find more information about this episode and past guests on the ODAT Chat website. Just visit odatchat.com, and ODAT is spelled O-D-A-A-T. And hey, in case you didn't already know, ODAT stands for One Day at a Time. If you would like to suggest guests or if you have some feedback or comments, you can email me at arlena@odatchat.com. So today my guest is Matt Kelly. Matt and I met in our book proposal writing class taught by New York Times bestselling author Anna David. In this episode, Matt not only tells us about his story, but also we talk about how to cultivate peace through meditation. And actually, this is a great segue to announce that Matt will have a regular spot on the podcast to provide you with meditations to help you cultivate inner peace. Whew, so with that, please enjoy this episode with Matt. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me on the ODAT Chat podcast.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I'm going to try something new, and you're going to be my first guinea pig. We're going to say a little prayer to open the podcast.
I love that.
All right. Okay. So I'll just take a deep breath. Dear Father, thank you so much for bringing Matt into my life. And I am super grateful for the time that we have together. I just pray that you lead our minds and our hearts, that this time be used for your purposes and that it may reach whoever it needs to reach. Amen.
Amen.
Yay. Thanks. That was the first time I prayed on the podcast. So why don't we do this? I typically start out with, asking you, what you do and stuff for a living. But I thought maybe I might try something else new and ask you, where you grew up and what you were like as a little kid.
Oh, very good. So I grew up in a college town, Columbia, Missouri. And a little background, before I arrived, my parents had already had 3 kids. They met in the mid-1940s after my dad had come home from the war and my mom was in college. They were both there in Columbia. And it was kind of a idyllic love story. Dad was the fighter pilot returning.
Oh, wow.
Mom was from Chicago, and she was in Stevens College down there, which is a school for women that's still in existence. And at the time, it was mostly a finishing school. Mm. And so from the pictures and the stories, it sounded really lovely and romantic. Mm-hmm. And then in pretty short order, they had 3 kids. My dad had had a really difficult upbringing. Both his parents were dead by the time he was 8 or 9 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And so he got farmed out to some relatives that didn't really want him. Oh. And just had a really hard time of it. He started drinking at a young age as a primary coping tool. And my mother, she grew up in Chicago in a family that was pretty well-to-do, but somehow, somewhere along the way, she had something happen that later turned into schizophrenia. That flared up about 3 years before I was born. So she was in a place called Menninger's Institute in Topeka, Kansas, which at the time was kind of one of the leading places to treat this sort of thing. And they were really kind and compassionate and used the best science and technology available in the 50s, which wasn't all that great.
Right.
So she had a lot of shock treatment and something called insulin coma therapy while my dad was home taking care of my older siblings. And then for about, I think, 18 or 19 months of that, she came home. The story is that it was against the doctor's advice at the time. And then a couple years later, I was born. So you asked what I was like as a kid. I think being born, being in my mother's womb at a time like that, it makes perfect sense that I would have a heightened fight-flight emphasis on flight system. Because I'm sure that she had to have unimaginable anxiety after through, and that she was hearing voices by then. And so I came into the world with spidey sense. If you've seen any of the Spider-Man movies, you know. And as a kid, I was pretty exuberant and sensitive and on high alert a lot. Dad's drinking began to get worse about that time and then just continued to get worse. So without going into too many of the details of it all, it was a place that rewarded a spidey sense, because stuff was always happening. And it was useful to be able to anticipate it and avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah. Was your dad violent or?
Yeah, at times he could be. More often, it was this weird kind of psychological abuse. When he would drink, especially about the time I was 8 or 9 and going on, he would, we always had dinner at 6, and there was some normalcy that way. We had a nice house in a nice neighborhood. He was, he owned his own business, which was affiliated with the printing industry. And he had good employees who took care of that, even though he wasn't there. So outwardly, we did pretty well. We were pretty comfortable. But down in the basement of this nice home, he had a bar, and every night he'd drink a lot of beer and bourbon. And I don't know, about somewhere around midnight or 1 o'clock, he'd decide it was time to have some kind of interrogation, and he'd get 1 or 2 or 3 of us up and take us downstairs for these weird, kind of paranoid, off-the-wall interrogations, complete with their own rules of order. You had your time to talk. And
my goodness.
Yeah.
So this was when you were how old were these interrogations happening?
It started when I was probably 8 or 9.
Oh my goodness. So he'd wake you up out of bed and bring you downstairs, and he was really loaded by this time, right?
Yeah.
And all of your other 3 siblings had to participate?
Well, by that point, there was 8 of us.
There was 8 of you?
Yeah, so there's a family of 10, 8 kids.
Oh my goodness.
Right,
okay, so you're number 4 in the lineup. So you're like the quintessential middle child.
Right.
Oh my, okay, so not all 8 kids at the same time.
No, usually 2 or 3. And in general, it was the younger ones, because by then my older siblings were teenagers.
Okay.
And, for whatever reason, I'm guessing because in his mind we were easier, it was the younger ones.
Wow. Oh, gosh. And was your mother aware that this was going on?
Yeah, she was usually down there.
Was supervising or?
No, she would try to
damage control or?
Yeah, as best she could, but she really couldn't, I mean, I say they both did the best they could, and a lot of times that wasn't very good. Right.
Yeah, not good enough.
Yeah.
Gosh, so what do you think that effect had on you looking back? I mean, there's your little friends.
The effect that had on me was kind of twofold. It really gave me a baseline anxiety.
Yeah.
I was, and it's taken a lot of years to sort of compassionately outgrow that. The other thing it did that's taken some time to outgrow was instilled this sort of habitual hair trigger temper. Because what would happen for me, during those encounters, especially as I got a little older and a little bigger physically, was I would unconsciously use this strategy of playing possum, and not, responding to his interrogation with short, simple, non-emotive answers that would sometimes cause him to sort of run out of gas,
Oh, interesting.
Dismiss the meeting and we get to go back to bed. Like, some sort of primal animal toy, like a cat playing with a mouse, and I would just act dead.
Right, yeah.
In hopes that the cat would leave. But, as I got into my teen years, I didn't have the same capacity to do that, I don't think, as a kid. And he would poke longer and poke harder. And so what would happen over and over again is I would do as long as I could and feel this energy welling up in me like you're pulling back on a pinball. And, I would just launch up off the sofa and be instantly enraged and screaming so loud to make my throat hurt. And sometimes we'd get into shoving matches. And so those two things were the effects that propelled me into alcohol first, and then weed and cocaine and hallucinogenic drugs and whatever. Because I'd really hated myself after that,
Yeah.
One for the anxiety and two for the
outbursts.
Mind like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anger does something to you. I mean, that kind of anger, I don't know. It feels like it wreaks havoc on your nervous system, on your whole heart and mind. And, nobody wants to feel that way, but you were absolutely provoked. And it seems like the person that was supposed to be, your guidance counselor, your protector, was the person that was creating all that. I mean, that sounds kind of traumatic.
Right.
I can imagine what that must have been like. Did your friends know what was going on? Did you share what was going on with anybody?
I had a couple of close friends that, and one that still is, and we knew about it because some of the same sort of things was happening in other households. But no, we didn't really talk about it. It was sort of the elephant in the living room thing.
Yeah.
Would go other places to get away from it, especially as I got a little older. I could climb out the window and
Yeah.
instead of staying there.
Yeah. So when did you start using? Did you start drinking first?
Yeah.
And when did you? How old were you when you started using drinking as a coping mechanism?
13.
13.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of the friends of mine that I wound up running and drinking with for a long time, this little camp out and said, "Hey, we're going to have some cigarettes and some booze. You want to come along?" I'd never done it before, but hey, I'm all in. I mean, I'd seen it done plenty because it was happening at my house. So what should have been a clue, the things that I took because the bottles were the fullest, right? I didn't have any idea about what was going to be good. We wound up getting drunk on rum and sweet vermouth, both straight from the bottle.
Ugh.
Right?
Ugh.
It was effective, but
we don't typically drink for taste, though, do we?
No, and I didn't even know about the possibility.
Yeah,
at that point, it was just. Then we all got sick and couldn't wait to do it again. So.
But wait a minute, there has to be a little something that happened in between the first sip and.
There absolutely was. That I chased was that layer of inhibition and anxiety and consciousness that was so present.
Was removed.
Yep.
Yeah, it was removed. And had you seen any of your older siblings drinking or anything?
Yeah, in fact, my older brother, who's also in long-time recovery, was kind of my hero then. It's interesting. Arlene, I had, have you ever had a psychic reading before?
I have not.
Yeah. I've had a few.
Should I get one?
From somebody good, I would highly recommend it. And if
Okay.
you're interested, I can give you the name and number. I've had astounding experiences. I'm skeptical,
Mm-hmm.
but I also am curious. So anyway, I've had some amazing experiences with a couple of people in particular who made it clear to me that there is a connection between the here and the hereafter. So, so anyway, the most recent one I had, I was specifically talking about subjects for this book that I'm working on in this class that we're taking together.
Yeah.
What my parents' input is in it. Because I don't want to throw them under the bus. I mean, there's plenty of stories that I could paint that would be doing that. And yet at the same time, I don't want to tell my story without including them because they're so foundational to it.
That brings up such a good point because it's like we want to tell the truth, right? And the truth is not always pretty.
Yeah.
And there is that temptation to want to counterbalance it with the positive stories too, so they don't look bad. But it really is the painful things that we remember, that sort of shape our lives. It's kind of interesting. So it is, I also, since we are both in the same class, I'm doing the same kind of work. It is that struggle between, what do you say and how is it going to affect the people that are in your life? And even if are your parents still with us or?
No, they're both long gone. That's why I was having this conversation through the psychic.
You had a conversation with your parents through the psychic?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please
go ahead with your story.
So,
the segue back to my brother, who's 4 or 5 years older than me, and at that point was kind of this perfect combination of captain of the football team and cool guy rebel. He got kicked off the football team, but he also always had a giant bag of weed, and access to booze, and he would include me in, so I was just sort of
included his little brother. That was sweet.
Yeah, well, my mom didn't think so, apparently. It was news to me, and it was sort of heart-opening to me, and I haven't told my brother about this. But she, with 8 kids, there was a lot for them to keep track of.
Oh, for
and it
sure.
was, I sort of had the unconscious notion that I was mostly off their screen. But this conversation...
Why were you not on their screen? Were you just not a problem?
No, I was a problem.
Oh.
I wouldn't say off their screen, that I was just trouble to them.
Okay.
I was the one in the family who reacted by acting out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, got sent to military school, and
you did.
Punched holes in the wall, and
you're such a mellow guy now. That's hard to believe.
Right? I'm glad. You see, people look at me now and they can't believe it. This is good. Exactly.
Yes.
What you want at this stage.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would more clearly say is that unconsciously, I thought that my parents both, when they did think about me, first of all, I didn't think it was all that often, and then it was like he's such a pain in the ass, kind of.
Oh, that's so terrible.
I didn't really think about it very much, honestly. They've been gone so long. But this conversation with Laura, where she said that they were both really worried about me and gave specifics that made it clear that this wasn't just some, pablum that could say that, anybody could say. And one of the things that she said was that she was upset at the time at my brother for his influence on me and steering me into the thing. the thing being drinking and smoking dope.
Oh, she blamed your brother.
Yeah, I don't know if she blamed him, but she was not happy with him for his role.
For his role.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. But you looked up to him because he provided you, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but did it feel like he provided you with a coping mechanism or made you feel important in some way?
Yeah. And, his exterior is what I sort of aspired to.
Oh,
the guy that had the pretty girlfriend and the camaraderie of the buddies and the devil may care sort of thing going on.
Yeah, I totally get that. Having anxiety or whatever, having a role model in your life who is like the opposite of anxiety,
right.
The exterior of not caring. I could see how that you would need, look up to that, because he was free from the thing that was causing you pain.
Well, it looked like it anyway.
It looked like it. Yeah. Yeah. I get that there's totally that difference between what we, have you ever talked to him about if he really felt that way or if maybe it was just a front at the time?
I haven't. That'd be a good conversation. My guess is that a fair amount of it was front. I mean, he was in high school, so.
Yeah, sure. But there is that, it's so funny because then we get sober and they tell us to act as if, but it's towards the good qualities, right? It's that we do need to start embodying some healthy behaviors and self-attitudes. And sometimes we're told to act as if until, we can embody. Yeah.
And like you and I were talking about before we started, I think that is kind of the key ingredient in bridging early sobriety.
Yeah.
I don't know how to have fun and be at ease for early on, without a drink.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk about that too, because I do want to get back to we had discussed earlier talking about how to cultivate inner peace early in recovery. So we'll head in that direction.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, and I had that same experience growing up of feeling super self-conscious too, and admiring those people who, it's like, I always felt confused. I don't know if you had this experience of like, how do they not care? Like, how do they turn their feelings off?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Why don't they care? So I always, like you, admired those people because I certainly didn't feel like I had that.
So when did you first start drinking as an answer?
Well, I had my first drink. I've been telling people it was about 10, but that can't be true because I think my mom had already married her, or had started dating my stepdad, her second husband. But it's just hard for me to wrap my brain around the fact that I drank earlier than that. But it was earlier than that. She had been dating and she went out on a date. And I have an older sister that's about 2 years older than me. And she went out on a date and left my older sister and I home alone. And I don't know why I thought it would be a good idea, but I thought it would be a good idea to drink some of my parents never drank in front of me. This was not learned behavior, but that'd be a great idea to drink some of that dusty old bottle under the cabinet. And my sister didn't drink, but I just remember that first drink that it burnt my lips and then it burnt all the way down till it hit bottom. But then once it hit bottom, it's like this warmth spread through my body. Yeah. And I felt good. And I actually didn't realize how bad I felt until I had the contrast feeling of feeling good. You know what I mean? It was like suddenly, like you were talking about, like the anxiety was lifted. And, and isn't that interesting? It's just like, that's what love and peace, it's really the absence of those negative feelings. And it was the first time that I had actually felt good that I can remember.
Yeah. And so why wouldn't you want more of that? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I still chase that feeling, but I find it in different ways. So
yeah.
But yeah, young. But let's get back to your story. So it sounds like you found the elixir,
Yes.
yeah, early in your teens. And did you have that common experience that I hear people talk about, fun with problems and problems?
Yes. Yeah. And I compacted. I was on the fast track. I was in honors alcoholism. So
That's awesome.
my whole career drinking really lasted 10, 11 years.
Okay.
And
included drugs?
Yeah. Pot entered pretty quickly after that because I had access to that.
Because from your brother?
Yeah. And I probably did more of that than alcohol. I don't know how much of it is because I like the effect better, or how much of it was because it was something that you could mask easier.
Yeah, for sure.
Get high multiple times a day and just chew some gum and change your clothes and
little Visine.
No. Yeah. But if I drank all day, I couldn't do that same thing.
Everybody knows.
Yeah. So my arc was those two things. And then I discovered hallucinogens probably at 16 or 17. And I really liked those a lot.
What kind? Like mushrooms or acid?
Yeah, that was the one I liked the best.
Okay. So what was your first mushroom experience like?
Oh, wow. My first mushroom experience was with my brother. And we ate a bunch, and we rode our bicycles to this park that the Kiwanis Club maintained, and had trails through the woods. And we knew the trails from when we were little kids. We started seeing things and tripping. I remember at one point I was completely mesmerized by the fire pit that basically a circle of rocks with some ashes in the middle. Yeah. But it was alive. It was undulating and pulsating.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I was standing there looking at it with my mouth open. And my brother was over there going, "Oh my God," looking at a leaf with a caterpillar or something on it. And these two little kids came up and saw us, and they were just being little kids. We weren't much older than them. They were 10, maybe we were 15 or 16. And I didn't even notice them until I looked over at my brother. I don't know what he had said or done, or if they just saw the way he was looking at stuff. But they had this wide-eyed kind of look of terror, and they turned and were riding away like they'd come up with crazy people.
Scared of you.
Yeah.
That would be a little off-putting to,
Right. If you're used to, the wildest thing you ever saw was, Johnny Quest cartoons or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Having a spiritual experience in the woods would be too much.
Yeah. And so when did it start? When did you start having some consequences? Were your parents aware of you and your brother's drug and alcohol usage? Did you have trouble in school?
Yeah. The consequences started pretty early, and I don't know how much of the consequences were strictly due to alcohol, and were just my acting out.
Yeah.
So the summer between 7th and 8th grade was when we had that camp out.
Okay.
And then, I would get bolder and bolder with my dad. And was stealing money from him and taking the car out. I was 13 years old, climbing out the window and taking the car out.
Wow.
Right?
Stealing the car at 13?
Yeah, in the middle of the night.
Wow.
Picking up some friends, and we'd go play pinball and smoke cigarettes and think we were cool.
Oh my gosh.
But one time,
we're a little hellion.
One time I backed into somebody, and the police came and, took us all home. And one time we were hiding in the bushes by the movie theater, throwing rocks at the marquee sign, trying to knock letters off because we wanted to get our initials, and take them home and put them in. And we got caught. I mean, just stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
I got caught shoplifting.
Did you ever get arrested?
The police came every single time, but they didn't arrest me. No, a different time. This was the early 70s. So,
okay.
And then I started getting destructive at home too. Getting mad, I punch a hole in the wall, and we were doing crazy stuff. We were taking, the lawnmower gas and pouring it in the street and lighting it on fire. I mean, I was really angry and, just
really angry. Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow the thrill of that helped assuage it a little bit, kind of like alcohol did. It was like a pressure release,
Yeah. Don't you find that things like anger, and destructiveness, those are all distractions from our feelings? It's like it doesn't sound like you had a whole lot of coping skills. Like you didn't.
Not healthy ones, yeah.
Not healthy ones, right. Did your parents take y'all to church?
In fact, I was in parochial school from first grade through fourth.
Okay.
And we went to Mass Monday through Friday for that.
Monday through Friday, wow.
Yeah, before school. And then Mass on Sundays too.
So what was your concept of God in your earlier years?
I think that sort of fed into things, Arlena. The concept that I grew up with was of a distant God who was Jesus' dad, who sent Jesus down to die a horrible death. How awful we all are,
Right, yeah.
And, that we were born with original sin. We were tainted from the beginning. The best we could hope for was to not screw up too bad and go to heaven. And I remember praying for God to make my dad stop.
Yeah.
Or to make the voices that my mom heard stop.
And he didn't.
No, and those prayers weren't answered in the way that I thought that they ought to be. And so I had enough anxiety that I wasn't ready to go completely dark and skeptical. Okay, I didn't think it through, but that just seemed like that was like crossing a line that even I didn't want to cross. But I had no time for it. I guess if you'd asked me about it, I probably would have said, that's a bunch of crap.
Yeah, that God was a bunch of crap.
The whole God thing,
Really, yeah. And I'm sure there was no distinction between spirituality and religion at that time. No,
I had no idea. That didn't come until a lot later.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that you have this paradigm at home where you have this father who is, unkind, to say the least, and doesn't seem to be very sensitive to how you're feeling or if you're sad or scared or and then your interpretation of God being Jesus's dad, who was also sounded very similar, of like your description of your father, right?
Yeah.
So why would you put any faith that God would help you, and then to have unanswered prayers that way?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So when did your concept of God change? Or how has it evolved since?
Oh God, it's evolved so much. And that's really the genesis for this book. And we'll talk about that later. But it first began to change when I finally got into recovery, and we were talking in meetings about choosing my own conception. That just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I can do that? Wait, isn't there a right one?
I know. That is a mind-blowing concept.
Yeah.
What? All this time I could have chosen?
Do that.
Yeah. It felt blasphemous to me at first.
It did. Yeah. It did at first. It's like, early in recovery, it felt so blasphemous because of I've tried on a lot of different shoes in that regard. And one that I tried on, and I'm at a point where I'm grateful that all the shoes are available, so to speak.
Yeah.
All of the paths. And I bless them all and everybody that's on any one of them. That's taken a little while to get to. But one of the ones that the pair that I tried on early on was the very outwardly sort of charismatic Christian. Remember when they had Promise Keeper events in football stadiums?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was part of that.
Okay.
And I did get some things from it. And I also sort of got clarity about my own spiritual path. But the idea that I could choose my own felt blasphemous in that setting, and I think some of the guys that I was there with were pretty outspoken and vehement about that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it is sort of a process to sort of, evolve from the, religion of our childhood to, did you grow up Catholic?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Christian church, but all very similar. It's supposed to be this way, right? This is God. Here's the box that he's in. Here's the rules. You're bad. You need to be forgiven for this horrible thing that you are. And then and then I had all those same experiences of, God didn't fix me and didn't answer my prayers, and then kind of gave up on it. But it's interesting how alcoholism or drug addiction will bring you to your knees and sort of make you reckon with that lack of self-sufficiency. You know what I mean? So can you walk me through that sort of reckoning time when you did you have like a moment of clarity, or did you bottom out that you decided you needed help? How did you get from that point of this, drugs and alcohol are my solution to this is a problem, I need help?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, the consequences were getting kind of more severe pretty rapidly. Within a 9-month period, I got a DUI, I got evicted, I got fired, I got another DUI.
2 DUIs?
Yeah.
Do they make you did you have to do jail time for that, or it was back in the days a little more lenient?
I had to do 2 weekends.
That's it?
That was it. And it's a suspended sentence of, I think it was going to be a year. So 2 weekends, 6 months supervised probation, mandatory AA meetings, related traffic offender program classes. And then if I didn't follow through on all those things, a year in jail.
Oh, wow. So that was some pretty heavy consequences.
So I did, yeah. And you know what? The seed was semi-planted. My dad was getting really bad by that point. He'd been in and out and had a few short sober stints, followed by worse drinking. And one of the things that really opened my eyes were those alcohol-related traffic offender classes, because they talked about the fact that this thing is progressive. And I had never really thought about that before. I thought, that when you had it, you looked like my dad. And they talked about something called the Jelinek curve. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, but it's an arc of alcoholism and then into recovery. And it's sort of quaint in some of the terminology and the examples, but some of the symptoms were already happening to me, like
like what?
Having blackouts.
Oh, blackouts. Oh, yeah.
And having consequences because of my drinking.
Right.
having trouble at home, all these sort of, they also had I think 12-question AA
Oh, yeah.
pamphlet. Are you an alcoholic?
Yeah. Those are
and
great questions.
Yeah. I had 6 yeses, and I think it says if you have 2, you have a serious trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Got an A.
but then what happened was I became really an A student of that, going to meetings, get my slip signed, my probation officer showing all my slips, even talking to my friends, the people, and that was awkward. I have empathy for anybody that's new in sobriety that's trying to do that now, because these were people that I 3 months before had been drinking with to excess, and now I'm not, and I'm talking to them about AA and alcoholism.
Oh, well,
yeah.
What was compelling you to talk to them about AA? Were you finding solutions?
It's a great thing, and I wanted to sell it.
Yeah.
You guys need this, right?
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? We show up to a couple of meetings and we're like, oh my God, everybody needs this.
I know people that could really use this. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a bunch of sick people.
Now you need it. Well,
they typically do not appreciate that, by the way.
No. That didn't go over. In fact, sadly, when I got released from probation, and my suspended sentence was lifted, I began to go to fewer meetings and then no meetings. And I was still hanging out with the same people, and trying to drink a Coke, while they're having beers. And one guy in particular who now has since died of this disease, at the time said, "You're not an alcoholic." Bless him. Clearly he had it too. And I wanted to believe him. And so I was like, you know what, you're right. I just need to be more disciplined and grow up with this stuff. So I thought it was a matter of having some rules to live by. And so I made them up. And I think I remember an article, kind of a cover piece in Psychology Today from around that time that was on the theme of how to come full circle from problem drinking to social drinking. And so I followed the tenets of that. And it was basically only have a couple and don't do it every day. And,
Yeah. How'd that work out?
Not so great. I did drink less. It was about a year-long process.
Okay.
But the thing that really surprised me was how obsessed I became with drinking, even when I wasn't. And how worse the anxiety and the anger became. And I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night. And occasionally I would let myself go, break the rules, get sloshed. And it was such a relief. I felt like, some dog barking and pulling on a chain when the chain would finally break, and I could just run and bark.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I just had the mother of all panic attacks. I won't go into all the details of the story. You'll have to read the book for that.
I can't wait.
Right?
Hey, you'll have to come back after the book is done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I asked my fiance to stab me.
To stab you?
Yeah, I said, just kill me.
Oh.
At the end of this god-awful weekend where
Oh my goodness.
And then, no, I don't mean to do that,
Right.
like 6 or 8 times. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah.
And she left and she said, you need help.
Right.
And I went and I had, what so far has been my last drink with a guy who knew me and my dad and my history and who had done a lot of crazy stuff with me. And I remember nursing that last drink and feeling just disoriented with all the everything of it. And saying, I had gone through this litany of what had been going on with him, how I hadn't been able to sleep and how I was having these panic attacks. Felt like I was losing my mind. And, I hadn't had DUI, hadn't been fired. Outwardly was living the ordinary normal life. But inwardly, I really felt like I was losing my mind, and was being put through this emotional chipper shredder. And I said, I wonder if it's about drinking, if I really have a drinking problem. And he looked at me and he said, well, I don't see how there's any question.
Oh, wow.
Right? So there was no sermon. There was no finger point. There was no nothing. It was just like, duh.
Yeah.
And
we like to call that spiritual rudeness where I come from.
yeah. And it was very gentle rudeness. It was sort of this,
Oh, gentle.
I'm glad you're finally smelling the coffee,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
isn't it funny how it's those subtle little comments said at just the right time that finally break through? And so is that where your recovery journey began? You went back to AA?
Yeah. Went back to a meeting that night.
That night. Wow.
Yeah.
And never look back. Did you do the whole deal? Like you got a sponsor and started working steps and the whole thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I've had a few along the way. And
you've been sober a long time, 35 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you've only had a few.
Yeah. And at this point, a friend named Paul, and we sort of sponsor each other.
Oh, nice.
It's definitely evolved in how I do the steps.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the beginning, did you find someone to, like in my mind, a sponsor, like their only job really is to take you through the steps. You know what I mean? Like, and somebody that you can talk to obviously and call occasionally or whatever. But I think it's sort of, I think people put a lot, I remember when I first started sponsoring people, I felt a tremendous amount of responsibility. Like I was responsible for, I was unclear that wasn't my job to save anybody, right? It was just to work steps with people. But but now that I've been sober a while, I do find sort of that it feels like mutual sponsorship, somebody that you trust and can share things with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably, in addition to working the steps, that a sponsor should have qualities that you want more of.
Yes. Yeah. Someone that has what you want. That's great advice. So let's transition a little bit. I want to talk about your, there's so many things I want to talk about because you and I are in a writing class. And so you're writing your book proposal. And I've had some insight as to sort of where you are in that process and stuff. But you also mentioned in the last class that you were posting meditations on Insight Timer, and you sent me one that was magical. It was about gratitude, and you have this soothing voice and just such kind words arranged in just the right way where I was able to sort of get into that zone of presence and in gratitude very quickly. It was amazing. So congratulations on that. I'm excited.
Thanks so much.
I'm excited to hear more.
Yeah.
And you also have a website?
I do.
Okay. What is the name of the website?
The website is called recoveryourpeace.com.
Oh, I love that. Recover Your Peace. And, we were discussing earlier about, because I do want to bring solutions to the podcast. And in the beginning and the end of the podcast, you talked about how to cultivate your peace and share your gifts. And I thought, what is really the practical application of that? Early in recovery, we need to find a way to cultivate peace within our family relationships, at work and in social life. And he had some really interesting thoughts around that. So I thought maybe, I would just give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on how to cultivate inner peace in those arenas.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I think this is one of the biggest challenges for people early in recovery, and one of the primary reasons why there's so much relapse.
Yeah.
As alcohol or shopping or sex or cocaine or whatever has served the purpose of giving you that sense of peace. And it sure did for me for a while.
Yeah.
And then I chased it long afterwards. And I piled up this mountain of stuff that was giving me stress. And then I got sober, which basically meant taking away my coping mechanism. So here I am with all this self-created stress and no idea on how to solve it. I think in the beginning, that fake it till you make it is so wise. I had an epiphany, and I was sharing this with the group in the meeting today. The topic was the serenity prayer. Right? And I think in the meetings that I've been in over the years, acceptance is probably the one attribute in that prayer that gets talked about more than the others. Occasionally, wisdom, and even less courage. Okay. But so, those movies that, like the Dan Brown movies or the Indiana Jones movies or the Nicolas Cage movies where they're solving mysteries and they're using these sort of things like secret phrases hidden in the Declaration of Independence, on the floor at the Library of Congress.
Some sort of code.
Over and over, and everybody misses. I felt like I had that experience with the Serenity Prayer.
Oh.
I've seen and heard and said that thing tens of thousands of times. And what dawned on me just within the last few months was it starts with God grant me the serenity to accept. And so that it's like, oh my God, if I cultivate serenity, I naturally have the ability to accept. I naturally have the courage to change.
Yes.
I naturally have the wisdom.
Naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. So rather than trying to sift and sort through some weird overanalyzing process on how to accept something, it's how do I cultivate the serenity so that I just naturally accept it. So anyway, this probably a couple of years ago, I decided to start a Step 11 and host a Step 11 meeting with the group, and I've been doing it ever since. And the motivation was that before I had that discovery, I sort of knew it, that meditation for me is one way to cultivate serenity. And it's one of the most important aspects of the steps that I think is missed a lot. It took me a long time to actually practice. The please in the morning and the thank you in the evening kind of prayers.
Yeah.
But developing a meditation practice is difficult. Especially for somebody with a busy mind who starts with a typical follow your breath and let your mind empty. I mean, that's championship level stuff there. And my mind would just get more busy trying that. So I tried other methods, guided, just music, outdoors walking, all sorts of different kinds. And they worked better for me. And I thought, well, I want to do this as part of a group. And it's been fantastic, really. I've got a number of people that come and appreciate it. And
do you find that meditating in a group feels more? How is that different than meditating by yourself?
The different piece of it for me. So here's the format of how we do it. I will either bring something that I've recorded or something that somebody else has done. And I try to bring in different styles, although I'm finding that people in general most appreciate the guided variety.
Yeah.
So, for example, tomorrow I'll take that gratitude one to our
that was really good.
And thank you. So it's a traditional AA meeting format. The difference being there's a meditation at the first 25% of the meeting. We open with the preamble and the serenity prayer and the announcements and the celebration of anniversaries kind of stuff. And then I'll talk a minute or two about the topic. Tomorrow it'll be gratitude. And then we'll all meditate and tomorrow will be on that gratitude meditation. And we do it with the lights out. It's in this beautiful old church up on the 3rd floor, and there's nice natural light that comes in. And it's in kind of the middle of some trees, so you look out the window and you feel like you're in a tree.
Oh, nice.
And it just creates this really nice, calm, peaceful, shared energy that people share from. And so the magic that happens in an AA meeting with the sharing just happens from that lower energy place. That
grounded, peaceful. Yeah. Oh, I bet that's magical.
It's pretty great. Yeah.
I
really loved it. And so that was the genesis for the website. I have people that come most of the time, that I can't always. And so early on, they started asking me to record it. So I would just on my phone, and I'd email it to them. And then I thought, well, I like this, and I think I could kind of be good at it. So I started doing my own, where I'd have my phone. My office is pretty quiet, so I could share, and I'd have my iPad next to the phone playing some kind of waterfall or ocean surf or music in the background. It's like my own little recording studio. And so I would make these little amateur mixes and then bring those to the meeting. And then I thought, well, I wonder if there's somebody around here that's got a studio that, it wouldn't cost too much to do. And so I put the word out in this recovery Facebook group, and they said, you need to go see Mark. And so Mark's got a studio in his house.
Wow.
And that's what he turned his life into 15 years ago. And so he has all kinds of amazing people that come through town on their way to their gig wherever, and that want to do a little studio work and stop. And so he charges a very reasonable rate, and he does the mixing for me, and
wow,
he's a meditator himself. And so then I thought, okay, well, I want to turn this thing. I've got this idea. We'll see if it's going to work. It seems really good. That I'm getting good feedback on the meditations.
Yeah.
I do have gratitude and confidence that I've got something that can help people there. And so my model is a little new. We talked about some other teachers and the models that they have. And generally what I see from the people that I especially like on Insight Timer are that they have a yoga practice.
A yoga practice.
Therapy practice. Or a coaching practice. And they upload their work and give it away free on Insight Timer, for a twofold purpose. One is to help people, and the other is to make people aware of what they do. I've got a small business that supports us pretty well, and my wife is a therapist. Between the two of us, we have a comfortable life and income. So what dawned on me, and I'm working on, is I want to have these meditations available, some for free, some for a small, modest cost. Right now, it's $6 on the website. And all the money is then going to turn around and go towards recovery-oriented causes. There's an organization here in Kansas City called First Call.
First Call?
Yeah, First Call.
As opposed to Last Call?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And a friend of mine is the CEO, and I have other friends that are on staff there, and they do really amazing work. And they're a 501c3, and so some of the money that they use to pay their salaries comes from donations. And I thought, well, how cool would this be? The analogy that came to me was, with Mark's help and the other people in my group that helped me road test these meditations, and you and anybody else that hears this and is involved, it's like we're working on this orchard together, right? This little conversation we're having is part of tending to the orchard.
Yeah.
So that other people can come along and pick some fruit, right?
Yes, I like that.
And then, if anybody feels moved to give, then it's like a magnifier, a fertilizer.
Yeah.
Because then I'm going to turn around and give that money right now to First Call. And then hopefully my dream is the thing grows really big. And ideally I would love to get other teachers. You mentioned Sarah Blond, and there's a number of others whose work I really like. And once the thing gets wings, I would love to reach out to any of them that are interested to see if they'd be willing to donate a meditation and let their audience know about it.
Yeah.
So that we can make a bigger orchard.
I love that. We'll leave links to First Call. I'll get those from you afterwards.
Okay.
But everything discussed on the podcast can be found at the odatchat.com website. So we'll definitely leave links so that people can connect to your insight timer meditations and First Call. And we can even rally up a group of people to do like the first reading of your your book when it's ready.
That'd be awesome.
What do they call that? The pre-reader group or
something like that? Yeah, I'm still really green on this whole thing.
I know. We'll just figure it out together, right?
Yeah.
with Anna David's help. So that's awesome. So, okay. So meditation is the tool for cultivating inner peace.
Yeah. And to go back and answer your question a little bit more, I was joking at the meeting this morning about I have a longer list of things that I know how to do that rob me of inner peace than I do, than the list of ways to cultivate inner peace. And early in recovery, I think honestly it's more about trying to do fewer of the things that rob.
Right. Yeah. And replace with the funny thing is the only thing I do in moderation is self-care.
Yeah. I think the other thing that it takes a while to get good at is being kind to yourself, which is the same thing.
Yeah. Being kind to yourself. Isn't that something? Yeah. Because we're privy to all the dark thoughts and we think that's who we are, but we're not.
Yeah.
They're just thoughts. I mean, this could also be called Overanalyze Anonymous or
Yeah, and there's this weird kind of strange teeter-tottery balance that you have to strike because one of the key components, is denial.
Yes.
And one of the ways that that's pointed, for me or at least it was in owning all the stuff I did,
Yeah.
The first inventory step was really about I did that, and I did that,
yeah.
And then telling somebody else about it.
Right. Confession is good for the soul, as they say.
It's not very. It doesn't feel like you're being nice to yourself doing that.
Yeah.
But
it's purging, though.
It is. It's absolutely key.
Yeah. Purge all out. In the presence of kindness, your sponsor should be somebody who is kind, and so you purge all your human frailties in the presence of kindness and compassion, and somehow it doesn't feel as shameful.
Yeah, because and you've done this, I'm sure, with people that you sponsored. Let people know that you did the same kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely, and for the same reasons.
Yep.
Because typically I didn't feel good about who I was, and I was seeking relief. And, selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, because nobody was looking out for me, or so it seemed. So I had to do it. So it's just this twisted form of, self-care. It wasn't really self-care, but self-management.
Well, you thought it was.
Yeah.
It's like Oprah says, you didn't know better. Yeah. And when you know better, you do better.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
So true. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. And I can't wait to have you back when you're done with your book. And listen, you can actually come back anytime you want. If you want to do part 2 and talk about some more solutions, we can absolutely do that.
I love that.
Yeah. And let's give a shout out to your website again. What is it again?
It is recoveryourpeace.com.
Recover Your Peace. I'll put a link. Really, that's it, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to recover our peace, because if you have peace, you don't need the myriad of distractions that are available to us, right?
And it's already there too, isn't it, Arlene? We just lost the path to it.
Yeah, it's like the treasure is on the inside. It's in the best kept hidden secret spot is on the inside. So I love how, this is meditation is the way to recover that. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to speaking with you again.
See ya.
Okay, bye. One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.